all of us are supposed to put our thinking caps on, because this is something which can either be a, graveyard for a physician or for a dermatologist or a pediatrician or for the patient himself, or it can be a crown of glory where you can hit a diagnosis and then save the patient's life too. So having said that, I will be first dealing with a few basic lesions, because most of you all are postgraduates. You'll have probably forgotten your dermatology, and there is an inherent fear of lesions of dermatology. So I will just go through the initial basic terminologies which we use in dermatology. So first and foremost, there are 4 or 5 of these terminologies which all of you all should be very, very clear about when you get to know about maculopapular rash. A macule is a circumscribed alteration of the skin color or texture which is less than 1 centimeter in diameter. So what you'll see is a small mole which is flat is usually a macule. A papule, on the other hand, is elevated. It's a solid skin lesion and it is less than 1 centimeter in diameter. An elder brother of a macule is a patch. So a non-elevated skin lesion which is greater than 1 centimeter in diameter. And a plaque is again a circumscribed elevated skin lesion which is greater than 1 centimeter. So for every macule, you have a patch which is larger. For a papule, you have a plaque which is larger than 1 centimeter in diameter. So a cutoff is 1 centimeter. And a nodule is something which arises from the dermis or the subcutaneous fat, pushes up the epidermis and causes an elevated skin lesions. I'll show you representative photographs. So this is how a macule will look. It's flat, right? Ideally, I would say that this is the ideal of a macule, the red one which I've shown. Some of them have joined together to form a large patch, in fact. And you will notice on top, I have shown line diagrams wherein you can actually have brown macules, you can have blue macules, you can have red macules. So different colors can occur in macules. And also notice that hardly any dermis is involved and it is largely involving the epidermis. The second is a patch where it is larger than 1 centimeter in diameter. And again, it is largely a upper dermal reaction, which might lead on to a size larger than 1 centimeter in diameter. A papule, this is how a papule will present. Solid elevated lesion, less than 1 centimeter. A plaque, which is larger than 1 centimeter. A classical case would be a psoriatic plaque. And a nodule, a neurofibromatosis would be a classical example of a nodule. Or this intradermal nevus. Now there are 3 other terminologies. Vesicle, a circumscribed elevated fluid-filled skin lesion which is less than 1 centimeter in diameter. And if it is a circumscribed elevated fluid-filled skin lesion which is larger than 1 centimeter, we call it a bulla. And if it is filled with pus, you call it as a pustule. Usually there is no demarcation for the measurement for a pustule. Most of them are 1. But if it is larger than 1 centimeter or they join together, we call them as lakes of pus. Now this is how a vesicle would look. Bulla, pustule, and you can also see the lakes of pus around here where they are all joining up together to form larger pustules. Erosion, ulcer, excoriation. So erosion essentially means it's a break in the continuity of the skin which is very superficial. An ulcer is a break into the continuity of the skin which is deeper. Okay. Whereas an excoriation is a linear break in the continuity of the skin which is due to scratching. Basically, that is an excoriation. So there should be a break and should be linear. Whereas you can call an excoriation as a linear erosion, right? So this is how an erosion will be. Just a superficial peeling of the skin, just like what you develop in a friction blister or a thermal blister. An ulcer and crust, scar and scale. A crust is dried up secretions, necrotic debris, serum, pus, all of these form a crust. Whereas a scar is an area of skin which is replaced by fibrous tissue. Whereas a scale is only the stratum corneum or the upper part of the skin which is actually shed out. It is not the entire skin which is shed out, but it's only the upper stratum corneum which is thickened, which is shed out. So this is how a crust, which is a classical presentation of this particular entity, Anybody? Any pointers? There's no bulle there, but you can just call it an impetigo. So honey colored crust is characteristic of impetigo. Scar, this is probably a keloid. And a scale which you see in psoriatic lesions, you can see in pityriasis versicolor, you can see in pityriasis rosea. So pityriasis means scaly, or even if you say squamous means scaly. So most of the pityriaciform lesions or the scaly lesions will have the upper stratum corneum shedding out because the epidermis undergoes a proliferation and then sheds out. Now we come to the rashes. Having understood these basic terminologies, we come to the entity on rashes. Now, a rash is only a layman's term for a noticeable change in the color or the texture of the skin. Now, for the layman, it is either a scaly rash, a bumpy rash, or itchy rash, or a irritated rash. We have to be a little more specific. So, we have a host of rashes which we encounter in clinical practice. So, the first, when you see a rash, is to differentiate what type of rash is this. Is this a maculopapular rash, which is a topic for the day? Or is it a papulosquamous rash? Means you have small papules which are also slightly scaly. I'll show you photographs of how a papulosquamous rash looks. Urticarial rash, where you see evanescent wheals or dilatations, which are most often transient. Very rarely they go beyond 24 hours. Then you have vesiculobullous lesions. That is one presentation, which can rupture and leave behind erosions. Then you have a purpuric rash, where there is extravasation of RBCs into the skin, because these small capillaries or the small blood vessels, they rupture and leave behind a purpuric rash. A pustular rash, where there is collection of neutrophils, either sterile or infected. And of course, we also see lichenoid rash, which is quite specific to dermatological conditions. Drug induced is also another reason for a lichenoid rash. So these are all the different types of rashes that we encounter. However, because it's a huge topic, approach to rash is a huge topic, so we'll be breaking it up into smaller units. So today I'll be dealing only with maculopapular rash. So we have three terminologies which are commonly used. They're all synonymous: morbilliform rash, exanthematous rash, or a maculopapular rash. Now what you see here in this patient is, in both these patients, is small papules. They are slightly elevated. This is a two-dimensional picture, but if you actually appreciate it, it's almost like sandpaper or very fine granular. So these lesions are slightly elevated, but they're smooth in character. A papulosquamous lesion, on the other hand, will be slightly roughened because it has scales. So it will be slightly dilated, and they may all join up to form larger patches of these rashes. So a maculopapular rash, because it starts off just as an erythema, and then the erythema, the dermal erythema, is because of the blood vessel dilatation, and that dilatation swells up the epidermis, and then the epidermis becomes elevated, and that is how we get a papule. So that is because of the upper dermal inflammation which is occurring. Now this is how a papulosquamous rash will be, where there will be scaling. On the right side, you can see the scaly lesions. Or better still, actually, if you look at this particular inset picture, you can make out that there are scales on top of it, whitish scales on top of it. So that's a papulosquamous lesion. Vesiculobullous, it's quite obvious whenever you have a look at vesiculobullous lesions, or for that matter, pustular lesions. Sometimes you might get pustular lesions with drugs. You can get it with miliaria, which is a heat rash, or a purpuric eruption. Most of you all would have seen cases of Henoch-Schondlian purpura or vasculitic lesions. Urticarial eruptions, we see day in and day out. Several patients coming to us with urticaria. Now coming to maculopapular rash proper. So they are erythematous macules and papules which are 2 to 10 millimeters in diameter, and they have a tendency to become confluent because adjacent part of the vascular network gets involved, and that's how. So as I mentioned, a macule is a dilatation of the upper dermal blood vessel which causes an erythema. Whereas an erythematous papule is because of vasodilatation. There is an upper dermal edema and fluid extravasation with the epidermis causing something called a spongiosis. So once the epidermis is engorged with the fluid, the edema fluid, there is intercellular separation, and the cells between the epidermis, they get engorged with this fluid, and that is what gives rise to a papular eruption. Now, the term maculopapular is actually non-specific, as many eruptions will start off as maculopapular and later on they might become either papulosquamous or become pustular, or they may show some amount of vesicular eruptions. So it can branch off. Initially it will start off as papulosquamous. So the moment at which you may be seeing the patient may be papulosquamous. 2 days later you might see a few vesicles coming up here and there. So your diagnosis would not change because it's only that a more severe reaction has taken place. Or prior to formation of a vesicle, there would have been a maculopapular rash. So even in severe viral infections, we see some patients presenting with small vesicles here and there. So we call them as spongiotic vesicles. That is because there is a florid erythematous reaction, and that is causing the maculopapular rash. Now, I have mentioned this, maculopapular versus papulosquamous. How do you differentiate? Maculopapular has usually a smoother surface and the papulosquamous has a scaling on the surface. Now, when you are encountering a patient with a maculopapular rash, there are a few questions. So I have made a small questionnaire which you can actually use it in your clinical practice, right? So first ask the patient, when did the rash start? So a patient was apparently normal, when did it start? If it is a few days of origin, think about either a viral or a bacterial etiology or even a drug etiology. So hardly a few days duration. Or it could be a contact dermatitis which can be presenting as a maculopapular rash. Say for example, somebody develops a fabric contact dermatitis, he has worn a new dress and the areas of contact with the dress are on the abdomen and on the chest, or with sparing of the vault of the axilla, we think that it is possible a fabric contact dermatitis. So the areas of contact give us a clue. Whereas an exanthematous eruption arising out of a viral fever would be involving the entire trunk, right? So these are pointers to see. That is why always when we see a patient with a maculopapular rash on the trunk or on the body, when they say strip the patient and see. Without stripping, your examination is incomplete. Just examining here and there would not make your diagnosis, because you have to look at several aspects of this rash. The quality of the rash you have to look at. You have to look at how the rash has progressed. You have to look at the distribution of the rash. You have to look at whether there are associated lesions elsewhere. There are newer lesions coming up. What is the morphology of those rashes? Preferably always use a hand lens if you can. That will actually give you a better morphological description. Now, if it is 1 to 2 weeks duration or a little more, think in terms of, again, certain drug rashes, like what we call as DRESS syndrome. You've heard of DRESS syndrome. That is drug-related eosinophilia with systemic symptoms. So DRESS syndrome or DHS, or sometimes certain of these oncology drugs can produce late reactions as much as 3 weeks to 9 weeks. Carbamazepine, antiepileptics will produce a rash only after 3 weeks. So they present with a maculopapular rash. At that point in time, you have to think of a drug and ask if the patient has been on any of these drugs. So that is why it's important to know the duration as to when the patient actually. Is the rash recurrent? Now he may be having recurrent episode. This may not be a one-time episode. So then you have to think of certain differentials. One would be DRESS syndrome, as I mentioned, because it is prone to recurrence. Once you stop the steroid, again it might come back, because it's an antigenic response and it can recur over a period of time. So DRESS syndrome patients take longer to actually remit in comparison to, say, for example, an urticarial rash due to a drug or a erythematous rash due to a drug. Now, lupus erythematosus. It may be an undiagnosed case of lupus erythematosus. Patient is coming with recurrent maculopapular eruptions. So an adolescent girl maybe, and you have not thought of a lupus or a connective tissue disorder. It is your duty, if it is recurrent, to think of a vascular or a connective tissue disorders or a vasculitis. Food related. The same food may be precipitating it every time. So it is important to take a dietary history, whether this patient is taking a certain type of food and that is precipitating. So food diary may have to be maintained in such cases. Which part of the body did it start can give you some clue. Usually you will see that rubeola, rubella and scarlet fever start on the face and then progress downwards, right? Roseola would start on the, roseola would actually start on the trunk. That is HHV6 would start on the trunk. Erythema multiforme, it will be predominantly seen in the extremities and lesser of the rash on the trunk. Or for that matter, photodermatitis. Naturally, photodermatitis should be seen in the photoexposed areas, the V of the neck or the extensor aspect of the extremities. Then if you have palms and soles involvement, it is more likely to be a drug related. One of the few viral infections which actually produce a palms and soles involvement is hand, foot, mouth disease. But erythema multiforme, on the other hand, produces palms and soles involvement. Right? So you would think more in terms of a drug rash. Having said that, some viruses can produce an erythema multiforme, or some bacteria can also produce an erythema multiforme. It's not only drugs which can cause an EM rash. So you must always remember that also. So the erythema multiforme rash may be precipitated by herpes simplex. So you have herpes associated erythema multiforme, HAEM we call it. So it could be a viral infection which has precipitated an EM, or it can be a drug which has precipitated an EM. Now the fourth question which you'll be asking, how has the rash progressed? So the best person to tell you that would be the mother or a bystander, whoever it is. So is it a centripetal or a centrifugal distribution? You have to elicit that history. Is there edema, associated edema, whenever the rash has progressed? Because that edema will actually cause the rash morphology to change. That is why after you have seen a patient, say for example with the Kawasaki disease, you will see post-inflammatory desquamation. Once the dermal edema occurs and then it reduces, the edema reduces in intensity, it desquamates. The epidermis will desquamate. That is what you see as a desquamation at the end. Even at the fingertips or the palms and soles, they are the last to desquamate, and that is why you see them. Whereas on the trunk or on the face, you won't see them because every day there is a continuous process of shedding. Whereas in the palms and soles, it is very, very delayed because there is accumulation of the stratum corneum, and as sheaths, it goes off. Right? Now, purpura or ecchymosis. Some of these dermal reactions may be so intense as to cause a purpura. There is an extravasation of the RBCs and causes a purpura, and that can lead to an ecchymotic. So certain areas, when you see, it will be erythematous, and certain areas it may be purpura. So you can have an overlap. That is what I am trying to mention here, right? So how do you differentiate whether it is an erythema or whether it is a purpura? There's one simple test. Use a glass slide and do what is known as the diascopy test. Just apply pressure with a glass slide and then release it. When you release it, if you see that the blood is filling back again, it is an erythema. That means it's a simple vasodilatation which has actually engorged the skin, and that is the erythema. Whereas a purpura will not blanch because it's a fixed extravasation which has occurred. So purpura and ecchymosis with a glass slide, if you press, you will always, once you remove it, you will still find that the erythema is there. So that gives you an explanation that this is a purpuric rash. Now you should ask for other symptoms. Any symptoms before the rash? Did the rash develop first or the fever develop first? That you usually would have asked. Were there any prodromal symptoms? So a prodromal symptom will not always tell you whether it's a drug rash or a viral rash. There are other indicators which I will come to later. Any symptoms with or after the onset of the rash, like for example pruritus, that might go a little more in favor of a drug. But having said that, not all drug rashes maculopapular drug rashes produce pruritus, and not all viral illnesses will produce pruritus. All viral illnesses need not produce pruritus. So you can have a variations depending upon the inflammatory response of the body. But think of a drug when you get a patient's history that there is, along with the rash, there is pruritus. Coryza, headache, conjunctival congestion, you can get in both viral and drug. Arthralgia or arthritis, if the patient is complaining of, think of connective tissue disorders, think of rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and so on. Dyspnea. Respiratory symptoms may be predominant in certain infections, like for example, an echovirus or an enterovirus or a parvovirus or a measles. So these are the ones which are more likely to produce a dyspnea or a respiratory difficulty. Diarrhea and vomiting. That history is important because that may be the association of the viral diarrhea which has led on to a maculopapular rash. So the viruses may be the one which may be presenting as a vomiting or a diarrhea. Next and most important is the patient sick? So if the patient is sick, you have to give a guarded prognosis because he's come with either a hypotension or an altered sensorium, which may be indicating an encephalitis. There may be electrolyte imbalance. There may be cardiac problems, which you might never have thought of. Suddenly patient goes into a bradycardia. It could be a myocarditis, or it could be a pericarditis where the patient is finding it difficult to even respire at points in time. Or it could be a patient present with a jaundice and a rash. So you have a host of viral illnesses which can produce other symptomatologies, which can give you clues. So just by looking at the maculopapular rash, you're not able to diagnose it as either a viral or a drug, because even a drug can produce a drug-induced hepatitis and cause a jaundice. Especially we see that with when we give ATT or anti-tuberculosis drugs, or neglected case of drug reactions, drug-induced hepatitis with the maculopapular rash. All of these, sometimes we do see such presentations. So look out for these small clues. So let your examination be systematic and routine. They may be presenting along with the rash, they may be presenting with hematuria, oliguria, or anuria, which may suggest that the patient is actually gone in for severe dehydration, because there is so much of insensible water loss that might have led to an acute renal failure. Or it could be that the renal involvement may be secondary to the primary illness. Or there may be a bone marrow suppression. A patient may be presenting with just oral ulcers or fatigability. So when you do a CBC, will you be able to identify that there is this maculopapular rash as an association? Now coming to the age of the individual. In an adult and child, it is also necessary that you ask whether the adult has traveled elsewhere. Somebody who has gone abroad and picked up a Zika virus may be presenting with just a maculopapular rash. So air travel or travel to exotic destinations or locations, like patient has gone for a trekking or a hitchhiking. Or you should ask the patient if they has taken any medicines recently, which he or she may not remember. So it may be when you ask, have you taken any drugs? He will say no. You insist and ask, did you have any back pain? Or you ask a lady, did she have any dysmenorrhea? Did she take any medications? Did she go to the counter, over the counter, something she purchased? That is when you will actually get. So you ask for other symptoms. Or any alteration of the food or drink habits. Like for example, somebody has gone to a restaurant about 2 days ago and then developed a maculopapular rash. Or coloring agents. Lot of these coloring agents are added into food as food additives. So they can actually precipitate a rash because it produces an immune complex reaction, something similar to a serum sickness. So you can have patients presenting with a maculopapular rash in that also. Have you had any change in habit or lifestyle or hobbies, like a new cloth or a new sport was started, or the reuse of an old blanket? It's as simple as dust-induced contact dermatitis. So during this season, this rainy season or the winter season, that is when patients would have kept it in the cupboard and then they start reusing it, and that is when they get the rash the next day with a little bit of pruritus. So you must be able to think on those lines whether this rash is related to something of that sort. Do you have pets or contact with animals, right? And have you had any bite mark? Very often, that's why we say many a case of scrub typhus is missed, largely because they have not stripped the patient and examined. There will be an occasional bite which the patient may not be considering significant. He would consider it as an ant bite or a spider bite or some other bite. Specifically, pointedly, you have to ask for that question. Is there a bite mark anywhere? Right? In children, you have to ask for immunization. It could be a first attack of measles, or if the patient already has had measles, it could be that the patient is having an atypical measles presentation. Similar lesions in the mother or the family. So where there is a measles outbreak or a outbreak of viral illnesses, you have to think on those things. Has the child recently joined a nursery or a creche? That could be where the source may be lying. Or as I mentioned again, change of clothing or new contact. So when you see this maculopapular rash, we've asked so many questions. We've arrived at some focus towards diagnosis. Now you have to describe it and put it on paper as to what is your description of the rash. Just writing a maculopapular rash would not be sufficient. Very often we ascend consultation, finally opine on the maculopapular rash on the trunk, right? After this class, if you're able to say a little more about what the rash is, I would be very happy. This is all the slide on which I want you all to be awake, because this is where dermatology comes in. So first and foremost, find out if it is discrete, it is confluent, or some discrete and some confluent. So you put it as discrete and confluent. Erythematous. Obviously, most of these rashes which present maculopapular rashes will be erythematous. Region. Is it localized or is it generalized? So when you describe, you will say discrete and confluent, generalized erythematous rashes. So generalized would mean that either you're dealing with a viral exanthem or drug rash, or a SSS, Staphylococcus scoliosis syndrome, or it could be a Kawasaki disease, or if it is a young teenager or an adult who has had a sexual contact, it could well be a secondary syphilis. which the patient would not even, because it's largely asymptomatic. Unless you ask the sexual history, you would never be able to pick it up. So you have to closely think of all the differentials when you see a maculopapular rash. Or if it is localized, it makes it much easier. It could be just a contact allergy, or if it is occurring around the flexures or more of contact areas, think of miliaria, which would be just sweat rash. So you ask the history, do you sweat out a lot? So then you would probably get the history that, or the patient has had a fever, and following the fever in the areas of sweating, maximum sweating or contact, you have a erythematous rash, think of a miliaria rubra. Or only on the photo-exposed areas. He must have taken an antibiotic, like say for example, tetracycline, which is a photosensitive drug. He would have gone out after that. And then he develops a photosensitive rash, which is a maculopapular rash localized to the photosensitive areas. So there again, stripping actually helps. You'd be able to see that in the photosensitive areas. Symmetry. If it is symmetrical, it means more likely it's an endogenous cause. If it is asymmetrical, occurring only on one part of the body, say for example, a patient or an individual goes and lies down on an unused mattress. He would lie down on one side and he develops a maculopapular rash on one side. So it means it is something probably exogenous, isn't it? Or he develops a maculopapular rash only legs below. He recently, he went and probably did a little bit of gardening, and then he had put his dhoti up. That is how most of us, munda madaki kuttitana nammal pulli vettan pova. So you will get a maculopapular rash only on the legs. So that will give you a clue that probably it is something. So you should see whether it is localized or a generalized rash. Then look for the distribution. Is it a diffuse distribution? Is it flexural? You can get flexural involvement, like for example in candidiasis. Young children, candidiasis is quite common, especially in the neck region, the axilla, the groin, or the perianal region, where there's an obsession to clean the fecal matter. So young mothers, inexperienced mothers, they tend to use all sorts of things on this small baby. So make sure that you ensure that cleanliness is done, but overt cleanliness is likely to cause more problems than, so that has to be emphasized. So intertrigo occurs because there is a break in the continuity. There's a break in the groin fold or a break in the skin. And on top of it, there is colonization by candida. That is how we get a candidiasis. So the break primarily has occurred because of excessive cleansing. So if you say it is lack of cleanliness, this mother will again go and do more amount of soap cleansing, more amount of Dettol, more amount of Savlon, or more amount of, now the latest fad is to use a sanitizer. So you end up with a very dry, burnt skin. Right? So I want you to remember this. This is something, habits of people are very, very important. You have to discuss with the patient. You have to talk to the mother or talk to the patient, and then you would be able to. There are even adults who actually have excessive cleansing habits bordering on OCD. So such patients would be having such rashes. Or a patient who actually takes a bath twice or even thrice daily, every time with soap, would have a generalized erythematous rash all over the body with extremely dry skin. So you would be searching for all the causes of maculopapular rash or a erythematous rash. Finally, you end up, you ask him to stop soap. Around 1 week later, he comes up with a perfectly normal skin with a small moisturizer. That is how these magical tricks take place. So you have to listen to the history and examine very closely to find clues. And finally, sun-exposed areas, always also think in terms of connective tissue disorders like SLE. So I have so far mentioned about maculopapular rash. Now we're going one step ahead and saying a maculopapular rash can coexist or can progress to others. Like for example, it can be associated with pustules. It can be associated with vesicles. It can be associated with bulla. It can be associated with urticarial rash. Like for example, vasculitis is a very classical example where you can get a maculopapular rash along with an urticarial rash. Or it can be associated with purpuric lesions like I mentioned. So a classic example where you will find a maculopapular rash progressing into some amount of vesicular eruption is a staphylococcal scarlet skin syndrome or a toxic shock syndrome. Or erythema multiforme, you will find small vesicles, a pseudo vesicle, what we call. So small vesicle in the center with a peripheral rim, the target lesion. So you will have small vesicles here and there. So very often people diagnose it as chickenpox and then even start acyclovir for that. It will be a simple maculopapular rash on which there will be small vesicles. Patient is given a diagnosis of chickenpox, and then sent back because the patient has not been examined in full and the history has not been taken properly. Now, these patients with maculopapular rash may have additional symptoms which may provide some clues. There are maculopapular rashes with fever. There are maculopapular rashes with pruritus and without pruritus. There are rashes with arthralgia and arthritis, which may suggest, say, for example, it may be part of a viral syndrome or something like a chikungunya, or it can be, as I mentioned, a Still's disease. Or it can, some patients may have mucosal lesions. Whenever we examine the mucosa, always make it a point to examine not just one mucosa, the oral mucosa or the conjunctival mucosa which is seen. Also examine or ask for history of genital involvement. Very often there may be a small scrotal ulcer which may be a clue for your Behçet's disease. There may be a small ulcer or bite mark on the scrotum or the groin or the thigh which may be a presentation of a scrub typhus. So always ask and look for genital lesions, even vulval lesions, scrotal lesions, anal lesions. Patients do not hesitate to tell us about it. They think it is a part of a fissure or they think it's part of piles. So always ask for history of whether there are anal lesions and also examine the nasal cavity. So all of these are mucosal. So examination should be complete as far as that is concerned. Lymph nodes. Whenever a patient comes with maculopapular rash, and if you have a lymph nodinopathy, think of these things. Rubella. Am I dealing with rubella or a parvovirus, or am I dealing with an HIV patient? Because HIV lymphadenopathy is very often missed because so many viruses have come into the picture now. We don't think about HIV these days. So photosensitivity I have already mentioned. Also, whenever patient present with dyspnea or respiratory symptoms, think of again a viral illness or a complicated drug rash with ARDS. Very advanced drug rashes can present with ARDS, and that could be the presentation. Seizures, headache, diplopia, blurring, dysgeusia. I don't think I have to tell you more about it. It could be a manifestation of a viral encephalitis or a vasculitis or a connective tissue disorder. So you have more pointers towards a systemic illness when you have a maculopapular rash with a seizure or a maculopapular rash with a delirious presentation. Gastrointestinal and syncope are two other manifestations which can be associated with this. If you ask me, can you give me some age-specific differentials? So neonates, very often we see rash presentation in the form of seborrheic dermatitis, or those children who sweat a lot may have miliaria. These are two common presentations of generalized maculopapular rash. But rarer ones also should be considered. Like it could be a case of neonatal LE or a neonatal candidiasis. Usually neonatal candidiasis will be pustular. But having said that, the initial presentation will be an erythematous maculopapular rash, which will develop pustules on top of it. So when you see the pustular eruption a day or two later, that is when you realize probably you're dealing with a neonatal candidiasis or disseminated candidiasis. Neonatal erythroderma can initially present as just small papules or a sheet of erythema, which might later go in for erythroderma. Sepsis can present with just a maculopapular rash. And of course, immunodeficient disorders, especially those which are recurrent, are more likely to be an immunodeficiency disorder. Adolescents, when they present with rashes, think of infectious mononucleosis, which is quite common. Onset of LE. Young lady of around 15 to 17 years of age or 20 years of age, adolescent age group, never ever miss the diagnosis of an LE. You can pick it up very early. Over the last, I think, around a year or so, I have been able to diagnose LE in the second decade just with simple signs like an oral ulcer or an alopecia. So having said that, it is your duty when you are in a tertiary level center or as a clinician to actually diagnose it and pick it up early, right? It could be vasculitis, or it could be contact allergies, or it could be syphilis, because that is at age when they start experimenting. Syphilis is back again. Now, earlier we thought we had a good control with syphilis. Now it is back again, right? So, and in atypical forms. I have patients under me who are actually on crystalline penicillin, on benzathine penicillin, but not responding, with doxycycline and still not responding. So there is an atypical presentation of syphilis. And maculopapular rash can be a presentation of secondary syphilis, mind you. So always think of this also in your differential diagnosis. I have to emphasize here the importance of the mucosa. When a rash develops within the mucosa, you call it an enanthem, right? An enanthem is most often related to an infection, but we don't tell a drug-induced enanthem. We say more often infection-related enanthem. Certain clues may be there. Like for example, a Koplik spots in measles. You know where to look for a Koplik spot. Forsheimer spots in rubella, or a strawberry tongue in scarlet fever, or even for that matter, you can get a reddened tongue in Kawasaki disease. You can get genital ulcers. That history may be there, that there was a genital ulcer earlier, which may be a clue why the maculopapular rash has developed right now. Also, there have been instances when patient has actually had a drug, like for example, sulfa. We had a patient who actually was prescribed sulfamethoxazole, cotrimoxazole for a suspected toxocara. She had a cat at home, and therefore they suspected toxocara. She had gone with a conjunctival congestion, and then she presented back to the ophthalmologist with a presentation of, not here, another hospital, presentation of a maculopapular rash with conjunctival congestion. She was told that, do not worry, it is part of the toxocara. And it was mistaken, nobody even thought about. She went the second week again, and she said it is increasing. Still it was not thought of. Finally, she ended up with me with a nearly 40%, not 40, 70% toxic epidermal necrolysis. And she put a case against the treating doctor for negligence. Now, this is where the maculopapular rash becomes important. It is medico-legally important. So, whenever a patient says that he has taken a drug, don't take it lightly. Just document it. Even if you are not sure whether it is a viral exanthem or a drug rash, you put a query or you just document that you have thought of a drug rash. That's enough for the court to say that yes, the clinician has taken sufficient amount of reasoning power and he has given due importance to that. So make sure that these small things are important in a diagnosis of a maculopapular, because the initial presentation will be only be a diffuse erythema or a diffuse maculopapular rash. Then after a few days, this rash keeps progressing, and then the patient starts developing the Stevens-Johnson syndrome. The mucosal lesions start coming, the hemorrhagic crust start coming, or the eye lesions start coming, or the genitalia will never be examined by most doctors because they feel it is not right to show off the genitalia as part of examination, or they don't complain about it. We have to elicit that and examine these areas. As I have already mentioned about Behçet's disease and SLE, early presentation may be an oral ulcer in the palate, most often symptomatic. When you look at the ARA criteria, they say actually that SLE, oral erosions, most often seen on the palate or the oral cavity, often detected by the physician. Because very often these people take it lightly. Now, what are the differentials when you have a fever and a maculopapular? I just go through roughly. I'll just list it so that you bear in mind what are the things that you have to think of. Viral infections, you have to think of measles, rubella, enterovirus. HIV, acute retroviral syndrome can be a presentation. EBV, like infectious mononucleosis, or even CMV can present as maculopapular rash. Bacterial, you have to think in terms of streptococcal. Scarlet fever, we don't make a diagnosis here that often. SSS, it can initially present as diffuse erythema with a paradoxical cry. That is the presentation. When the mother picks up the child cries. And when the mother keeps it on the cot, she's comfortable. He or she is comfortable. So there you will find only erythema. Then you will start developing small bullous lesions, or once that crusts off, you will find desquamation occurring in the perioral region or the periorbital region or the neck and the flexures of the groin. So a diffuse erythema or a maculopapular rash, you have to think in on these lines also. Sepsis syndrome, it can present as a diffuse maculopapular rash. It could be a simple urosepsis. You have not done a urine routine examination. You're seeing the maculopapular rash, just saying that it could be possibly measles and send the patient away. Finally, patient comes back with urosepsis related symptoms. So always make it a point whenever you see a patient with a maculopapular rash, as part of routine investigations, also send a urine routine examination, especially in females. Then rickettsial infections. One of the most difficult to diagnose You have lab tests agreed, but it's difficult to diagnose. Probably the easiest to diagnose would be a scrub typhus if you have thought of it. Fungal candidiasis I have mentioned. Drug rash I have mentioned. So drug rash, again, initial presentation will be very similar to a viral rash. So fever can be a presentation along with the maculopapular rash. Dress syndrome I have mentioned, especially when you are giving antiepileptics. So always tell the patient when an antiepileptic is being prescribed to report back immediately if there is a rash, pruritus, or feverishness, or body ache, or eye pain, or oral ulcers. So these are all oral erosions. Whenever these symptoms the patient presents with, always make it a point to educate the patient when you are prescribing carbamazepine, phenytoin, phenobarbital, or for that matter, allopurinol. So all of these. Now, connective tissue disorders again can present with a febrile illness, because every spike of fever, there is a rash coming up, and that spike may be associated with an infection. And that is why you will get a fever and a maculopapular rash in a connective tissue disorder. Okay. Inflammatory disease, you have seen several cases of Kawasaki disease, I presume, or Kikuchi's disease, which will have a painful lymphadenitis and a fever and a maculopapular rash can present. Immunocompromised patients, especially in neonatology, it is always advisable to look at maculopapular rash. You have to work up for immunodeficiency disorders. Those who have undergone bone marrow transplant can have a maculopapular rash because of graft versus host disease. And rarely, lymphomas can present with just a maculopapular rash. I will narrate an incident recently, around 8 months back. I had a patient by the gastroenterologist, Dr. Biju sir here, and I was asked to give my opinion on a rash which was just present on the V of the neck and a little bit on the mid back. It was a maculopapular rash, slightly angry looking red, and she had a diffuse scaling of the scalp, itching occasionally. So I just put my notes as probably seborrheic dermatitis. And Biju sir was saying, somehow, hopefully a skin biopsy will give me some idea, because all the workup has come out negative so far. And lo and behold, the skin biopsy showed an advanced cutaneous lymphoma. It was just a simple maculopapular rash involved, an elderly lady of around 67 years of age. And she expired within about 2 months. So a maculopapular rash is something, that's why I mentioned that a maculopapular rash can be a graveyard for a physician. Had I not done a biopsy at that point in time, had I not listened and done a biopsy, I would have just disposed it off as a case of seborrheic eczema. So that is extremely relevant, that you work up a case of a maculopapular rash. You might well be. This is one thing which is very often asked. How do I differentiate whether it is a viral rash or a drug rash? Frankly speaking, even I do not know. When I'm given a viral versus a drug rash, I too am confused, because a lot of overlapping features are there. But I look for certain pointers. So I'll show you the pointers which both of them can present with a prodrome. You consider yourself, you are encountering a viral exanthem versus a Stevens-Johnson syndrome. That's the comparison we are trying to make here. So both of them have a prodrome. Both of them have predominantly coryza-like symptoms, conjunctival congestion. But when you see palms and soles involvement, think of an erythema multiforme. I mentioned one of the few viral infections which present with palms and soles involvement is hand, foot, mouth disease. Pruritus, it should go more in favor of a drug rash. Pruritus can occur even in a viral infection, but usually it depends on the intensity of the inflammation, because there are neuroimmunomodulator mediators which actually cause pruritus even in viral infections. But the extent of pruritus will be much more intense in the case of a drug rash. Prominent mucosal involvement. In a viral rash, you will find a mucosal involvement either in the palate or here and few small erosions. But you will find hemorrhagic lesions or very prominent erosive and ulcerative lesions here. And there is always a clear chronologic duration between the drug administration and the onset of the rash. So that is what gives you a clue. There was a drug started. So if you have a drug, say for example, a penicillin group of a drug or a fluoxetine group of drugs, quinolones, you will get a rash much faster. Maybe you will get it in a few days. But if you're dealing with an anti-epileptic, you will get it only after 14 to 21 days. If you're dealing with certain malignancy drugs, you'll get it only after 6 to 9 weeks. So it's always essential that you ask for the chronology. ask for all the drugs, ask them to bring all the details of all the drugs. So that workup has to be done by the consulting physician. Nobody else can take that history in detail, because that is where probably the clue lies. And having said that, this is a note I would always like to put. A coexisting viral infection can actually precipitate a drug reaction. That is why some patients will tell you, sir, I have taken amoxicillin, ampicillin earlier. I have never had a reaction, but this time I got a reaction. Why? That is because the viral illness has actually modified the immune response, and thereby it has caused the immune reaction to the drug. Okay. So the next set of differentials when you get maculopapular rash and pruritus. Some maculopapular rash can present with pruritus and some without pruritus. If it is with pruritus, in order of relevance, I would say first think of drug rash, then think of contact allergies, then think of photosensitivity if it is a photodistributed, and last you think of a viral exam. Whereas if it is without pruritus, first you think of a viral etiology, you think of a connective tissue disease, which is usually without pruritus, inflammatory pathologies like I mentioned about Still's disease or Kawasaki disease for that matter, or vasculitis will not have much of pruritus, and malignancies rarely have pruritus depending upon the extent of involvement. Intense pruritus as a terminal presentation of malignancy is known, right? Because cutaneous deposits will occur only usually in the terminal stages of malignancy. That is why you will have intense pruritus in the terminal stages of malignancy. Whereas a cutaneous lymphoma will primarily present as only a rash. So it's always essential that we differentiate between the two. Now, very often people ask, sir, can you give some clues to say that this maculopapular rash is this disease? These are some clues which are there, but most viral exanthems will present in the same way, right? Only you can say it's probably a viral or a drug exanthem, but look for these clues. If there is Koplik spots, for Scheimer spots with lymphadenopathy, think of rubella. If you see a slap cheek appearance, I have not actually seen a slap cheek appearance patient. Have you all? You have seen one patient with that. No, because very often around 3 months of age onwards, you can get atopic dermatitis, atopic eczema developing similarly. Around you will have a erythematous or an edematous or an eczematous lesion occurring here. So transient appearance of a slap cheek appearance with a proven parvovirus B19, then it is worthwhile. Typhoid fever, you can actually get a maculopapular rash with rose spots in the abdomen. Scrotal ulcer or a genital ulcer, you can get in Behçet's disease. Eschar, if you see, it is probably scrub typhus, and a target lesion is more likely to be an erythema. These are some things which I could collect as specific to certain diseases, but most of the other patients do not come with this sort of a presentation. They come to you with a rash and you are supposed to diagnose it. There was an age-old teaching about this particular, the day of the onset of the rash and whether you can correlate. I do not know whether there is any clear-cut definition as far as this is concerned, but for theory sake as well as for exam sake, first day disease is measles, second disease is scarlet fever, third disease is rubella, fourth disease is Duke's disease, fifth is erythema infectiosum, and sixth is roseola. Okay, so these are the 6 days of rash. Depending on that, they had classified it long time ago. I don't know how far it is relevant now. Now, how do you investigate when a patient comes with a maculopapular rash? So the first and basic thing is to do a hemogram. You will get a lot of clues from a hemogram. You find a neutrophilia or a neutropenia. You find a eosinophilia, think of a exogenous agent like a contact allergy or a drug rash. Because eosinophilia is often seen as an allergic reaction. So if you get a clue of a eosinophilia, think of that. Or if you get a lymphopenia or a lymphocytosis, again, one would be thinking of a viral. Monocytosis, again, viral. So you look for clues in the CBC. Then, as I mentioned, look for urine routine examination. You would be getting a lot of clues in the urine routine. Nephrologist friend of mine says, for them, the most relevant investigation as far as kidney disorders is concerned is the urine. It should be handled and given the due respect. Even now, whatever advances we have in medicine, I think these 2 investigations give you the maximum pointers to anything, right? ESR or CRP as your choices, that will give you that probably it is an infection. LFT, RFT, and a random blood sugar, as is usually done. Peripheral smear. A peripheral smear with atypical lymphocytes goes more in favor of a viral. Whereas if it is a lot of eosinophils that you're seeing, it's more goes in favor of a drug or an exogenous agent, right? Don't forget to do a VDRL and HIV workup whenever you're dealing with a reproductive age group individual. I believe no one in this auditorium, and you don't believe me also in this matter. That is how we are taught in venereology. No person is above this, right? So please always make it a point to think about sexually transmitted diseases as a differential, because this comes transiently and goes. The secondary syphilis rash comes transiently and goes. HIV exanthem comes rash transiently and goes. It's a missed opportunity. So that is why we ask you to think of these also when you have everything else has come out negative. Viral studies you can do. Very often I send either a measles or a rubella IgM or an IgG, EBV and HIV. These are the common ones which I send for. And of course, dengue, arboviruses we do send. Leptospira we do send. But beyond that, the more advanced ones I would not venture because they're very expensive. And is it worthwhile doing that? Unless you are dealing with something resistant or a multi-system disease and the patient wants a diagnosis, I would not go for higher investigations. Rickettsial markers, I think you can read in any book which are the markers. I'm not going into that. Bacterial studies, always make it a point to look for the areas of pustular eruptions where you can actually get some clues. A simple gram stain, a simple blood culture or a simple pus culture sensitivity can give you lots of information, much more than what you would have got with any of your higher investigations. Now, sometimes there are occasions when none of this gives a clue. As I mentioned in the case of lymphoma, a skin biopsy may be helpful. Most often in a maculopapular rash, skin biopsy will just give upper dermal infiltrate, either of a eosinophil or a plasma cell or a lymphocyte or a neutrophil, whichever. But that infiltrate actually gives a pointer to some extent. So a skin biopsy may be required when it is a persistent maculopapular rash. ANA and RA factor, if you are thinking of connective tissue disorders, C3, C4 assay will also help when you're dealing with a vasculitic disorder. Ultrasound screening, echo and CT MRI are all next level of investigations when you're looking at complications related to this maculopapular rash. I'll just show you some photographs so that you all understand what is being spoken about. I know initially you all were confused. Now I have confused you a little more, right? But when you go back and look at this presentation, you will realize that there are small clues which you can take, which will give you some idea of where you're headed, right? So when we see a patient with a maculopapular rash today, even I am in doubt and you are also in doubt. Viral, bara drug. Is it viral? Is it drug? But there may be certain clues which you can look for, right? Now, this is a patient with an erythema multiforme after quinolone. So she developed this sort of a rash on the neck and on the extremities. She hardly had any lesions on the trunk, but she had these lesions on the palms. So which shows that they are well-defined erythematous lesions. And some of them have become pustular. You notice that some of them have become pustular. And she also had lesions on the soles of the foot. Sometimes you will get a classical presentation of a target lesion. This is a target lesion looks like, right? You have a central vesicular area surrounding erythematous area, the halo. So you can have two types of target. One is called the atypical target. If you find all the three layers, the vesicular or the eroded layer with a halo of pallor and then the erythema, that is a typical target lesion. Atypical target, you will just have two layers. Okay, but when you see this sort of a lesion, you can be sure that it is a erythema multiforme. So clues for erythema multiforme: maculopapular rash, feverishness with extremities involvement, predominantly the upper and lower extremities, some amount of mucosal involvement, and palms and soles involvement, target lesion. Think of pruritus, right? So this is a case actually of a bullous erythema multiforme. He had lesions nowhere else except these two lesions, palms and soles. He had these bullous lesions, hemorrhagic bullous lesions. He was an aspirin, that's why he had hemorrhagic lesions. And he also had the lip lesions. Stevens-Johnson syndrome, I mentioned, See, you notice that it was initially a maculopapular rash. This is noticeable in the neck. It was initially a maculopapular rash, which became a hemorrhagic crust, and then conjunctival congestion and hemorrhagic crust on the lips. This was probably around day 7 or day 10, round about a week after the presentation. So how do you differentiate between Stevens-Johnson syndrome and toxic epidermal necrolysis? That is also something you all should know, right? In Stevens-Johnson syndrome, it can progress to TEN, or you can get a de novo TEN. Viral infections cause a de novo TEN. Mycoplasma causes a de novo TEN, right? So in TEN, you will have skin peeling off in sheets of the epidermis, right? Whereas in the other one, you will only have focal areas of hemorrhagic crusting or vesiculation. So the other one is more risky because life-threatening. It has a lot of attendant complications to that. So the initial presentation of this particular patient would have been, can you see this on the arm? Just an erythematous rash. And that has finally ended with a loss of sheets of epidermis. So if this was picked up probably around 4 or 5 days earlier, probably this would not have occurred because early start of immunosuppressives or IV immunoglobulin could have been done. That is a take-home message I want you to take, right? This is the presentation of a drug hypersensitivity, almost like a sandpaper appearance. Fine, diffuse, as if reddened lesions all over the body. Usually these patients who have drug hypersensitivity syndrome to antiepileptics or allopurinol or minocycline, all of these, they actually have a facial edema. First, it starts off as a facial edema and conjunctival congestion and oral mucosal, occasionally a difficulty or a sore throat or a feverishness. Then the rash starts progressing downwards and you have this sort of rash, which will be blanchable on pressure. This is not a purpuric rash. The simplest test, if you don't have a glass slide with you, if you're in the periphery somewhere, just apply your arm over it and then release it. You will be able to see that the blanching will be there and it refills. The capillaries will refill. So this is a diffuse erythema. Now, one other differential diagnosis very often missed is miliaria rubra, right? That also has a presentation of papillary eruptions, erythematous papillary eruptions. And it can also start off as macules. If you notice very carefully, these are small macules, erythema, which later on become papillary. When I mentioned about the pathogenesis of maculopapillary eruptions, I did mention about this. That initially it starts off as a macule, the edema causes the fluid to get into it, and then causes a papillary eruption. This is because of occlusion of the sweat pores. I'll narrate another incident which happened around 7-8 years ago. I had a patient who was brought a newborn from a maternity center, and they are from a well-to-do family and plenty of moisturizers being given. So first, the neonatologist immediately, as soon as they saw the rash, he said, go ahead and apply a moisturizer, that will be sufficient. Third day, child is still irritable, and then another pediatrician was called, then a dermatologist was called, and finally they just landed up. And then when I asked, they had sets of 6 moisturizers being applied at the same time, and the child literally was in hyperthermia. There's absolutely no pore left. Everything was covered with moisturizer. So excessive use of moisturizers cause occlusion of the sweat pores. The skin has to breathe, and that can cause a severe miliaria, right? So when you prescribe a moisturizer, make sure that you educate the patient as to how much to apply, when to apply, and how to apply. So that will be another class. Moisturizers itself is another class. But here what I am trying to refer to is, very often patients apply oils, patients sweat a lot, patient uses very sticky sort of clothing or polyester blended clothing in a humid climate. And that is when they get a miliarial rash. And they might feel a little bit feverish also. After having done a heavy day's work on a Sunday afternoon, they, up to afternoon, morning till afternoon they worked, they had a severe bout of sweating, they are tired, they will be feverish, and they develop the rash next day and then come to you. So first and foremost, you should ask, when did this start? What were you doing yesterday? Right? So sometimes it could just be a miliarial rash. Another anecdote, my senior mentor actually was, in early days of practice, he had a patient who presented with a miliaria. He diagnosed it as miliaria rubra, he wrote, and he said, calamine lotion, you just go back. This patient didn't buy the calamine lotion. That day evening, he went to the beach. He took a bath in the beach, and next day morning, the rash is gone. Right? Why? Because when you take a salt water bath, the pores which have dilated, or the edematous mouths of these sweat glands have actually, the edema has been taken away by the osmotic effect of the salt, and thereby the pores got opened, the rash disappeared. No calamine, nothing worked. It's a simple salt water bath which worked. So that can present like this, as an, especially in fair skin individuals, you will find lesions like this. So also think in terms of a miliarial rash. It may be a child who may be having a fever for a few days and may be developing a miliaria on the third or fourth day in the ICU. Then I am called for a consultation, it's a maculopapular rash. So stop the moisturizer, give salt water compresses, by evening or day after next day morning it goes, then I'm okay with a miliarial rash. This is a patient, actually an adult patient, who presented with a rash on exclusively on the lateral aspect. And you notice that he does not have a rash in the central aspect. It is more of a new fabric which he had started wearing. Now, having said that, always look out also for serious ailments. So this should be there on your radar. That this patient with a maculopapular rash can eventually go in for a sepsis, pneumonitis, myocarditis, encephalitis, hepatitis, ARDS, and even death. So that's how I would put it, that maculopapular rash can be a simple problem like a miliarial rash, or it could be a more complex problem like an encephalitic death due to a viral illness. So you have a range of potentials to follow. So my suggestion is go back today and read this presentation, then you'll be able to arrive at somewhat of a diagnosis. I leave you with this particular flow chart which may be helpful. I found it on the internet. Patient has fever, is ill appearing. Yes, then you have a recognizable clinical appearance. Then it could be either an erythema multiforme or a measles rash. If it is not recognizable, think of all these: dengue, Kawasaki, Rocky Mountain and Ehrlichiosis we don't have. Ill appearing with no recognizable clinical appearance, then think of Coxsackie, erythema infectiosum, scarlet fever, varicella. If it is the other side, it is disseminated gonorrhea. I forgot to mention about meningococcemia and disseminated gonorrhea. Both can have very dramatic presentations with hypotension, maculopapular rash, fever, sudden loss of consciousness. So you can actually even develop with gonorrhea, which we don't see in the Kerala population as much, but it can occur. It may be an atypical presentation. A person who is a recluse sexually can actually have an untreated gonorrhea, which can go in for a disseminated infection. Or a drug-induced rash, Epstein-Barr virus, mycoplasma, roseola, and secondary syphilis. These are there. On the right side, you will have another host of differentials. I'm not going into each of them. Just I'll give you these slides. You can utilize them for your review. Thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Abhay.
Thank you.
That was really enlightening to all of us, I'm sure, because this is a very common problem which we see, a maculopapular rash. As you said, we are normally at our wit's end as to what exactly it is. As you have rightly mentioned, sometimes it's very difficult to differentiate between the two. I have a question here. If a child has viral fever and rash with Moxiclav or any other medication, can we repeat that drug later or not? This is from one of our participants.
Yeah. As far as the drug, see, where we have a viral fever with a suspected penicillin associated, Moxiclav rash, that means that it could be a virally modified drug rash. On a theoretical basis, on a research basis, a re-challenge is acceptable. But on an ethical basis, it's not usually given because you have other drugs which you can always give. But the standing is that if you have taken the patient into confidence, you can always give at a lower dose later on in the outpatient or under controlled circumstances, see if there is a rash developing, and then restart that drug later on. Because it's a valuable drug. Amoxicillin clavulanic acid is something which we use quite commonly. So this is what I do where the rash is not as bad as a Steven-Johnson or a TN. Definitely, just a simple maculopapular rash, I wouldn't mind attempting it, but under controlled situation.
Anybody has any doubt? I've unmuted all of you. You can ask, and those in the audience sitting there also, if they're asking, somebody will have to repeat the questions for the benefit of audience.
So the question.
Okay,
all pustular lesions don't. I am referring to a question here from the postgraduate. Pustular lesions, do they require antibiotics? All pustular lesions are not infective. First and foremost, when you see a pustular lesion, take the pus for culture sensitivity. See if it is staph which is growing. So until then, if you are strongly suspecting that it is a pustular infective condition, then you can give an empirical antibiotic. But having said that, invariably we find that these pustular eruptions can be either a miliaria pustulosa or it can be a AGEP, acute generalized exanthematous pustulosis, which can be related to a drug. So it is safer to diagnose it first and then start an antibiotic. All pustular eruptions should not be taken as a infective.
The question to you.
Yes.
If you have to start a drug like cotrimazole as prophylaxis, should
Yes.
we tell patients of rare complications like Steven-Johnson before starting the drug? If we tell them, they may not start due to the fear, but if we don't tell and they get Steven-Johnson's, it's a medico-legal problem.
Madam. Yes, madam. I do agree on that. It is it's something which a call which each physician will have to take. Depends on the level of counseling that we can give. So the way I go about it is, if I have to start a cotrimazole, I tell the patient, the moment you find either a erythema in the eyes or in the mucosa, or you find any disturbance, as in you're feeling tired or you're feeling any situation like that, report immediately. And I write it in my prescription, explain the possibility of allergies. So
Documentation is very important there.
Yeah, that documentation is done. And if you have counseled, I tell them this is a drug which I am giving because it's found effective in this condition. And if we feel that it is necessary here, and thereby I'm giving it. But there are very few people, around 1 to 2%, who might develop a rash. So please report immediately. Invariably, patients oblige. They will come back to us if they have a rash.
Do we have to tell them about Steven-Johnson's or just tell you may get a rash?
Madam, the Steven-Johnson is something which if we mention, it will discourage. I do agree. So it's always better to tell them as a rash, or tell them as a conjunctival congestion or an oral mucosal involvement.
Okay. Thank you.
That would be sufficient. So they will invariably get back to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other question? You can unmute yourself and ask. Anybody from the audience there in the seminar hall? Questions?
Urticaria. Yeah, the question is, in urticaria rash, is there any point in giving subcutaneous adrenaline? The principle behind giving adrenaline in urticaria is the normal physiologic antagonist of histamine in the body is adrenaline. So the best drug in a case of angioedema would be adrenaline. As far as urticaria is concerned, you will definitely find dermal edema and histamine release. If it is a histamine related urticaria, like for example, a food induced or an insect bite induced, all of these are histamine related. But if it is something like an immune complex related, like for example, you're developing a serum sickness like illness or after a fish, or so you may not get away with just an adrenaline. So adrenaline is a very valuable tool. That should be the first drug which you can give to a patient with an urticarial eruption, generalized urticarial eruption, because it gives the fastest response and without the side effects of steroids. That is why adrenaline should always be there in the armamentarium. It's safe to give. Most of us, we are afraid to give largely because we think of tachyarrhythmias and cardiac arrest. Now it should be given. What we do in dermatology is we use an insulin syringe because you have a good control. If you use a 2 ml syringe, you don't have control. So I use a insulin syringe. And if it's a child, I give either a 0.3 or a 0.5 cc first. 0.3 cc is what I give first. 1 in 1000, sorry, 1 in 1000. And give it in very slow. Ask the nurse who's giving it to sit there, do a baseline BP and pulse examination. And if there is a cardiac, say for example, there are adult patients also who have cardiac ailments and who develop urticaria. In such patients, we would be cautious, but always make sure that an ACG is done in such patients. Otherwise, if it's a child who has an urticarial eruption, I would ask the nurse to sit there and give it very slowly over 5 minutes. That will not cause any problem. So far, we have not had any complications if we give it like this. Subcutaneously, very slowly.
And give it at the dose of 0.1 ml in 1 in 10,000 dilution.
1 in 10,000?
0.1 or 0.01 of 1 in 1,000. 1 in 1,000.
Depends on the age, sir?
Yes, on the weight.
The weight.
0.01 ml per kg.
Yeah. We go up to 0.3. That is what we usually do. For children, we give to 0.3. It's not a standard.
30 kg for a 30 kg child.
30 kg.
Well, if there are no more questions, I think we'll wind up. Thank you very much, Dr. Abe.
Thank you, sir.
It was a very good presentation and really useful. And I hope we'll be able to rope in you at some other time also, because you just touched the maculopapular rash. A lot of other things, dermatology. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.